Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday and another episode of Learn with Lo. Excited to come to you guys today with even some new topics that we haven't really delved into too much, at least on this Learn with Lo platform. Definitely something that I get into a lot in my personal one-on-one sessions. And today we're going to be talking all about histamine, right? And to kind of set the tone, if you guys haven't, like I said, been around or you're not familiar with my work, hello, my name is Lauryn. I do our Monday Learn with Lo episodes every Monday at noon. And I like to bring you guys a little bit more of a longer form conversation around some various health topics, right? And so today we're going to be diving even deeper into this gut conversation with histamine, histamine intolerance, signs and symptoms of histamine and mast cell reactions, because it's been coming up more and more, even in my private practice with clients working one-on-one, and really seeing more of these kind of like histamine vibe symptoms popping up and wanting to give them their time in the sun and really make sure that we have a good conversation around it, right? So again, if you're, like I said, new to this platform, welcome. This is a safe space where we really are looking to inhabit my mission and my passion around creating this like seismic shift in the healthcare system that we know today, and really teach you what root cause medicine like truly looks like, how to adopt and embody the self-healing persona, right? And so nothing embodies that more than learning how to talk about things like gut health, right? And as part of this mission, I have had such a beautiful opportunity to guide so many individuals interested that are really like connecting the dots into the root cause of their symptoms, right? Fatigue, IBS diagnosis, my hair is thinning, I have insomnia, I'm gaining weight, I have Hashimoto's, I have acne, I have anxiety. I'm like, a lot of these things are often connected together, right? But I always use this like splash pad analogy, right? You think about like you go to a water park, and have you ever seen those like cement sections at like a splash pad where the water's like coming up out of various like geysers, but you don't exactly know what hole the water's going to come up out of. So you see the kids, having a heyday, like running around and like covering one hole and then another hole like geysers up, and they run over and try to cover that hole and then another one kind of geysers up. I love that analogy as it relates to thinking about our current healthcare situation, right? It's a freaking splash pad, right? We have this misunderstanding of the body and how it communicates to us, right? So every single one of those geysers is a symptom, right? It's the fatigue, it's the anxiety, it's the constipation, it's the autoimmune patterns, it's the weight gain, it's the hormonal imbalances, right? It's the migraines. All of these things are different splash pad geysers, and the conventional and honestly even a lot of functional practitioners are out there running around trying to just like band-aid and cover up the geysers. And I'm over here like, guys, why don't we turn off the water, right? I'm like, that's how my brain works, and that's how my practice works, is like, how are all of these geysers of symptoms kind of fitting together? What are they trying to tell us? What are they trying to explain to us? And how do we really dig back to like the root of the root of the root, right? I'm not about sitting here and running around covering up different geysers. I'm here trying to help you like totally shut the water off of these symptoms, right? Or these systems. So I love that splash pad analogy. If that like relates to you, I just see people a lot of times are like, oh my gosh, I feel like that's me. I feel like the lunatic running around trying to like stomp or cover up all of these different geysers coming up and all of these different symptoms throughout my body, but I can't quite figure out how they all define and connect together. And so I just think, like I said, such a great representation of why so many people are frustrated with like the conventional or honestly even the functional medicine model, because it's just as guilty of doing that as well too. So that's where I'm in the mode of like creating a whole different practice, a whole different mindset. We're taking that splash pad analogy and we're shutting the water off, right? No more Band-Aid solutions, no more just cover up strategies. Like, we're getting at like, what is the source, right? And so when I kind of think about this geyser analogy, or the splash pad analogy, I like to call it, I see this like unfortunate and like really frustrating phenomenon happening all the time, especially in more like complex cases where we see that symptoms have really progressed to include lots of different geysers, right? And so these individuals just get tossed around from specialist to specialist or practitioner to practitioner, and nobody is really helping them like put all of the puzzle pieces together together, it's really just like another cover-up strategy, kind of running around trying to cover up the splash pad holes, right? And I see this happening a lot in different gut mediated reactions. And so today I really wanted to take a lot of our more conversations where we've been talking about like more complex gut cases. Like last week, we really talked about some of those situations that I see as a practitioner that make me think that somebody is a great candidate for some additional functional gut testing, right? So we talked about that last week. If you're curious about that conversation and what I look for, either in somebody's labs or somebody's health history, to really know I'm like, this person is ready for some extra testing, like there's more going on under the hood. I think that another really common one that I'm seeing more and more pop up in practice is individuals struggling with histamine issues, right? So we're going to really dive in today because I think histamine conversations, histamine intolerance, mast cell activation syndrome, all of those types of things are relatively new kind of in the functional medicine world. There's some practitioners talking about it, some of them not, but I really think that it deserves its time in the sun because I know I've been having lots of conversations about it because I've been seeing it happen more and more even in my private practice. So let's just dive in. And I think first, like define some terms so we're all on the same page. Number one, what is a histamine response and how do I know that this is me or does this kind of sound like me, right? So histamine in and of itself is a compound that's found in the body and it's released from specific immune cells, right? Specifically mast cells and basophils, right? So if you kind of think about any time that you've had maybe just like common lab work done and they run like, it's called like a CBC with differential and it lists out all of the different white blood cells, right? Basophils and your white blood cells and red blood cells and eosinophils, right? Leukocytes, like all of those things are looking at the body's overall immune response, right? So basophils is one of those cells, immune cells in our body that releases histamine, right? And we usually think of histamine like when we think of like allergies, right? And you're not wrong. It's the same exact compound that we block when we have allergic kind of responses, right? So the body releases histamine to protect us against inflammatory or immune type reactions. It's a very healthy response. Now, the hard part though is it's not that histamine is bad. Like this is a normal, healthy response of the immune system in the body. We definitely want the ability to produce histamine. What happens or the problems occur when there's a dysfunction in our ability to clear the histamine out. There are certain enzymes in our body that are required for like seeing the histamine rise, and then we need to have these enzymes that are out there breaking the histamine down just as fast as it's building up, right? The most common enzyme is called DAO. Some people refer to it as the DAO enzyme, diamine oxidase, right? That's the scientific term for the DAO enzyme. So DAO, but when this enzyme is deficient in the body, then histamine can really build up, the levels start to rise, and we see more and more symptoms, and somebody even eventually developing some immune system dysregulation that we call histamine intolerance. At a very high level, we also start to call it mast cell activation syndrome, which is under the umbrella of autoimmune patterns, right? So it's kind of this like undistinguished, undiagnosed, we don't exactly know what to do with it. So we're just going to put all of these under the umbrella and call it like mast cell activation, right? So instead, I always kind of take a high level view of that and I'm like, that's interesting. Why is the body doing that, right? Why is the body like either producing such a big histamine response or why is the body unable to clear out this histamine properly? Very interesting. What are some situations in which that happens, right? That's where I start to get my practitioner wheels turning, not just like, oh, here's an antihistamine. It's like, cute, that works for like a couple hours, like to calm the histamine response, but it's not doing anything to prevent the next histamine response from happening or prevent it from continuing to develop into a bigger and bigger histamine intolerance issue because we're not getting at the root of the problem, right? In that splash pad analogy, we're not shutting off the water, we're just running around trying to stomp out the different geysers in how histamine responses show up in the body. So let's talk about that next, now that we kind of understand like what histamine is, what normal immune cells in the body actually produce histamine. We should have a nice robust ability to actually get histamine out of the body through this DAO enzyme. Let's talk about like some signs and symptoms. Like, how would I know I have a histamine intolerance, right? And this is where it gets, in my world, kind of fun, because a lot of times people have some seemingly unrelated symptoms and it all kind of goes back to the water underneath. Is like, ooh, we're seeing a histamine response here, right? So I'm going to start with some of the most like commonly missed ones, because I think there's like some obvious histamine responses, which we'll talk about, but I want to talk about the ones that kind of like get forgotten or get pushed aside or like misdiagnosed, right? So number one kind of sign and symptom, especially for females that we're dealing with some histamine issues, is what someone might dub the period flu, right? And this is referring to like severe PMS, even as much as like PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder. There are certain individuals, specifically females, that in those usually definitely the 3 to 5 days leading up to their bleed, they could get fever, they could get chills, they could get massive gastrointestinal issues, they can get swelling, they can get bloating, they can get mood changes, anxiety, brain fog, migraines, right? It's like, I'm talking like symptoms that really take a female out of their daily quality of life in those days leading up to their menstrual cycle, right? If you are struggling, or if you've Instagram or Googled it and you have ever dealt with some of these symptoms of what we would call like the period flu, know that you are having a histamine response, right? That is very closely tied to all of that. Other things that we tend to see, even if it's not a period flu, or even if it's a male and they don't necessarily have those symptoms, other things that we associate with histamine responses are migraines, flushing, specifically like flushing of the face or flushing of the skin. This can even progress into like itching, rash, hives breakouts, which, you know, those kind of make you feel like, oh yeah, histamine, right? The flushing and the redness and the hives. This can also manifest as like brain fog. Some people also feel this as dizziness. A lot of histamine responses show up in the gut. Diarrhea, nausea, abdominal cramping, right? Lots of different fatigue, hormonal imbalances, chronic sinus infections, right? Someone that's like always struggling with like congestion, or they just like can never really clear that. Sometimes it shows up as like a lot of postnasal drip for individuals. Anxiety, sensory overload, difficulty regulating blood pressure, difficulty regulating body temperature. I know it sounds like a broad range of symptoms, because it is, and like it kind of manifests in everybody's health a little bit differently. But when I start to hear a lot of these things, I'm like, man, I'm starting to think histamine. Like, what's going on with this mast cell response? What's going on with this immune response? Why do we, number one, why is the body creating such a big inflammatory response? That should be clue number one. It's like, where's the inflammation here, right? The body is obviously trying to do something healthy. It's like, I'm trying to help you. I sense that there's a lot of inflammation, so I'm just busting out a crap ton of histamine here, trying to help you. But then I realize that we don't have the capacity to clear it out right now, so it's kind of causing a lot of symptoms, right? So we get this really big influx of histamine. We need to ask where the inflammation is at. We see these symptoms popping up, like I said, little splash pad geysers all over the place, but here we are in what I would see like an individual struggling with symptoms like this might go to like a conventional medicine practitioner, right? And they're naming off all these symptoms and trying to identify, but really they kind of end up just like spot treating these symptoms, right? So they might leave with like an antihistamine prescription, right? It's like, oh, this should take care of some of the redness, this should take care of the flushing, this should take care of the hives or skin breakouts, right? Or they leave with like birth control. They're like, ooh, yeah, that period flu, like that just sounds gnarly. Here's some birth control, right? We'll just shut that off for you. It's like, yeah, but if and when I ever want to come off of birth control, like all of those things are still there, and the histamine is still there. So even if it's not showing up in my period, I might still have other symptoms of histamine. The birth control just shuts it off at that point in time of my cycle, right? Or they might leave with like antibiotics, or they might leave with anti-anxiety medications. So it's really just like this situation where there's so many different symptoms popping up, and all we can really do from a conventional standpoint is like try to stomp out the individual symptoms, but nobody's really asking like, what's the source of the water? Can we like shut that off, right? And honestly, even in like a functional medicine space, although I feel like there's at least a little bit more awareness around histamine intolerance, mast cell reactions, I have seen even a similar kind of misguided approach in different functional medicine avenues as well too, because we really just try to do the same thing. Like we're just spot treating these symptoms, but we do it instead of medications, we just do it with supplements, or we do it with like an elimination diet. That's like, it just like irks me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? Like putting someone and recognizing, number one, oh man, they're having a lot of histamine response. You Google MD that and it's going to tell you like, here, you need to eat an antihistamine diet, right? Okay, cool. That sounds like a great plan. Well, then you start to realize like, oh, so I need you to cut out avocados, bananas, citrus fruits, fermented foods, nuts, spinach, bone broth. Oh, and you can't eat leftovers because anything reheated has a high histamine response. And you can't eat any canned products because that also can cause a high histamine response. And so it's like, whoa, wait, like why are we cutting out these perfectly healthy foods and also putting the stress and the anxiety on somebody that they can't eat a leftover? And so they have to eat cook every single meal of every single day, like from fresh ingredients and like nothing shortcuts, no like packages or anything like that. I'm like, I am just anxious just thinking about that because that doesn't fit for most individuals, right? Like that's a full-time job right there. And so they're like, the anxiety of it then creates more symptoms, right? So this is just me wanting to point out like histamine intolerance, histamine symptoms are very real. And they are a lot of times like misdiagnosed because we're not able to put all of the pieces of the puzzle together and start to see what that individual might be dealing with. And instead of just either handing them a medication and the symptoms continue to pop up in 15 different places, or hand them like a supplement, right? Because there are like histamine blocking supplements out there. And I'm not saying they can't be beneficial, but it's no different than taking like a Benadryl or an antihistamine. It lasts for a couple hours and then what, right? Those things should be used as a bridge tool to be like, hey, I want you feeling better like yesterday. So let's put some of these things in. But the real work is we need to identify the source of the inflammation. We need to identify why this huge histamine response is happening, and we need to figure out why you're deficient in this DAO enzyme, right? There's certain situations why that happens, and we create that, and so then we can reverse out of it, right? And there's no need to have somebody on this really strict elimination diet, cutting out very, very healthful foods just to try to eat like a low histamine diet. I'm like, you can do it, and you might feel great for a few days. I was like, but the histamine is still there and it's still going to continue to pop up in just different splash pad geysers, right? So that's me telling you like how I've seen some of this histamine kind of dealt with. Either it goes like completely missed, right? It's like, ooh, we didn't connect the dots and we didn't realize this at all. Or we kind of realize and recognize it, but then we still just spot treat it or put a Band-Aid or a cover-up strategy on it and send somebody on their way, not letting them know like, hey, there's like a whole next step to this journey, right? So when I think about like recognizing signs and symptoms of histamine intolerance, I see these individuals, I feel for them. I'm like, oh man, like I can really see that, right? And so a lot of times I'll identify that and start to really help them understand the root cause of that, right? So we can and will and absolutely will use some therapeutic strategies to alleviate symptoms right away, but those are really only helpful for a short time, and all of the symptoms are just going to return again, or they're going to manifest as a different symptom if we don't get to like the root cause. So let's really talk about, I outlined really like 4 main reasons. You could throw in a 5th reason of why somebody might be producing, like I said, such a big histamine response, or more than anything, why somebody might be struggling clearing out histamine from the system. And these are the things that I help people attack in practice, right? So reason number 1, you guessed it, gut health, right? It's like, Oh, here she is going back to gut health. Yes, 100%. And that's just because there's a huge growing body of research that's connecting gut health and mast cell activation syndrome, right? We understand that 70% of our immune system lies in our gut. And so because of that, it's like, there's like this overactivation of the immune system happening from the gut. We're getting this like really big histamine response from all these mast cells and all these basophils. Like they're obviously responding to some sort of inflammation. What is it, right? So some certain things that usually correlate to this: leaky gut, right? Your classic like intestinal permeability. We also see things like small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or SIBO. Other overgrowths just in general, dysbiosis, specifically even like candida. All of those types of things have been known to influence mast cell activation and therefore histamine production, right? So that's why you also see like gastrointestinal symptoms usually coincide with a lot of these histamine responses or mast cell responses too. Like I said, the diarrhea, the cramping, the gas, the bloating, like lots of that. It's not surprising to see those symptoms because there's such a high prevalence and presence of mast cells like in the gut. And they drive such a big inflammatory reaction there. So we always have to know, it's like, okay, what are we searching for there? This would be a perfect example of, again, where I would use some of that functional gut testing to be able to really look at the leaky gut, the SIBO, the dysbiosis, potential overgrowths, intestinal permeability, things like that, to be able to identify, like, is that the source of the water in this kind of splash pad analogy? It's sometimes not the only thing, but it oftentimes is a really big correlator. There are also certain bacteria in the gut that if they get a chance to overgrow, they are known as like histamine producers in the gut, right? So there's certain dysbiotic patterns that we look for on something like a GI map test, for example. There's certain bacterial strains, and when my practitioner eye starts to see that those bacterial strains are overgrown in a certain individual, then I know that those are also histamine producing bacteria. Fun facts, right? Can we reverse all of that? Absolutely, we can reverse all of that. Does it happen in a day? No. And that's where some of those like bridge solutions can come in, and utilizing some, like I said, histamine blocker, some DAO enzyme support, some things like that. Like, yes, we're going to use those therapeutic strategies, but I don't ever want somebody to think like, oh, well, all good. I'm like, no. Like that was just like a Band-Aid, right? That was just us to alleviate some symptoms while we do the real work of kind of undercovering that root cause. Reason number 2, which is kind of related to the gut as well, but reason number 2 is going to be toxins, right? I know it's kind of like a trendy thing to kind of think about like detox and toxins and things like that, but we are exposed to more chemicals in our food, in our environment, in our products than any other time in history. And so yes, I fully realize and agree with the fact that we have kidneys and liver and we have a gut for a reason. They're really good detoxers, but also we might need some help, right? Because there's certain things that slow down detoxification pathways. Stress, standard American diet, nutrient deficiencies, like these people are not good detoxers. And so we might need to help the body a little bit with some of that detoxification process, especially if we're exposed to toxins and it starts to build up in the system. So chemical, food, drug, exposures are all like kind of growing concerns in that environment, and these can trigger mast cell activation in some individuals. Like notably, we think about things like mycotoxins, mold. That's why I kind of went back to that candida piece. There's certain medications, infections, stress-related triggers like smoke, perfume, insect bites. Like there's lots of different things that can kind of trigger for individuals some of these like mast cell kind of reactions as well too. Although it's not necessarily like a toxin per se, but we also throw like any viral or bacterial infections into this category too, which is why I think like kind of in this post-COVID era, we're starting to see more mast cell activation as well, because that was a trigger. That viral infection was a trigger for their immune system as well too. So We're seeing histamine responses related to, like I said, gut health. We're seeing histamine responses related to toxins. Number 3 big reason why I see a histamine response, specifically in females, but estrogen dominance, right? So estrogen and mast cell receptors are kind of besties, right? So mast cells can release histamine, which then have like receptors for estrogen. And so then more estrogen creates more histamine, and it's just like this round and around response we go. So it's not uncommon that I see, like, this is another clinical pearl as like a practitioner, as you get better suited in kind of sussing some of these things out. A lot of times I'll ask females, and sometimes their symptoms are worse during certain parts of their cycle than other parts of their cycle, right? And that's like, ding, I'm like, really big clinical pearl there for me. And they may not even have connected it. They're like, I don't get it. They're like, I know people think I'm crazy, but like there could be weeks out of the month where I just feel terrible. And then there's times where I feel like totally fine. And so in their head, they're trying to relate it to usually food, right? That's like the first thing. Like, man, I felt really awful this week, and I wonder what I ate. But then like that other week I felt great, but I ate that same thing, right? And I'm like, it's not the food, right? It's not about the food. It's about hormonal cycles that are happening behind the scenes. There's an estrogen dominance, and that's fueling this mast cell reaction and fueling some of this histamine response, right? So it's just this vicious cycle of like mast cells and estrogen and being unable to clear it. And that's where we start to see some of these like PMS, PMDD kind of symptoms come in. And we really need to then support estrogen in that picture, right? So gut health, toxins, estrogen dominance. Number 4 is going to be nutrient deficiencies. I know that's a pretty broad spectrum one, but the immune system does require a lot of nutrients, right? That's a very nutrient dense process. So a lot of times I can see histamine responses or kind of some mast cell reactions when the immune system is just depleted and it's not being supported. So usually I see things like vitamin D deficiency, B6 deficiency is a big one, vitamin C deficiency is a huge one. Other things that can be helpful, like your quercetin, is a great like antihistamine mineral that we can utilize as well too. So some people get deficient in those types of things. So lots of different stuff in like the nutrient deficient category that can also either impair the immune system function, or more so it can impair that DAO enzyme being able to release histamine from the body as well too. So if we kind of go back to that like geyser analogy or that splash pad analogy, right? It's like a histamine intolerance or a histamine reaction can show up a bunch of different geysers, right? It's like, is it flushing? Is it itching? Is it migraines? Is it fatigue? Is it bowel pattern changes? Is it bloating? Is it PMDD? Is it period flu? Is it migraines? Is it trouble regulating my blood pressure? It's like all these different geysers are going up, and instead of running around trying to put your hands and feet on all these different geysers with like, oh, I'm going to throw this supplement in, or I'm going to throw this elimination diet in, or I'm going to like, we're grasping at straws, and I get it. Like we want to feel better like yesterday. And those are fine, but we have to recognize like those supplements aren't the root cause. That elimination diet is definitely not something you want to be on long term, because talk about nutrient deficiencies and a poor gut. Like the gut thrives off of diversity and abundance. So we want to kind of like nix that as fast as we possibly can and really start to focus on like, is this a gut health issue, right? Leaky gut, SIBO, dysbiosis, candida, right? Or is this like a toxin exposure issue? Is this an estrogen dominance issue? Is this a nutrient deficiency issue? Sometimes it's a little bit of a couple of those, and it doesn't have to be just one, right? The unspoken one that I will make sure is at least like thrown out there, although we can't really do as much about it, right? There is a genetic component to this. Some people do have certain genetic polymorphisms, or genetic SNPs is what we call it, where they don't produce a good amount of DAO enzyme. Right? It's just part of their genetic makeup. So they're probably somebody that when they find that out, or if they find that out, they are just someone that kind of has to support histamine for the rest of their life. It's something that they need to be conscientious of, right? And so that's totally fine. So there's certain genetic predispositions. There's also certain medications, specifically like your non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, like your Advil, ibuprofen, Tylenol, acetaminophen, Aleve, like all of those types of things. Those can also be DAO enzyme blockers as well. So some people that are on, they just take those types of things willy-nilly or take them every day because of their migraine, right? They are then maybe kind of fueling some of that cycle. So this is just kind of wetting your whistle, getting your feet dipped in the toes of like hearing about histamine, hearing about mast cell reactions, because I have a feeling that even just based off of what I see in practice and how many conversations I've been having around histamine and seeing it on labs, like I don't think this is going away anytime soon. I think it's something that we'll just continue to see more and more of. And I would rather put the platform out there of educating about it and helping people recognize like, oh, okay, I kind of feel like some of that flushing or some of those breakouts and some of those migraines and some of those digestive patterns. And it's like, maybe I haven't really given this a root cause look, right? So going back to identifying what those root causes might be for you, if you feel like the histamine intolerance or that mast cell is part of your journey, right? So lots of fun stuff to dig into. If you feel like that is you, you're like, oh my gosh, she is speaking my language. I feel like I'm finally seen. Like, help me with this histamine intolerance issue. That's where, like I said, you would be a great fit for, like I said, some of my courses and programs. My Master Your Metabolism course can really help direct any like nutrient deficiencies and fill in a lot of those gaps for sure. And then jumping into like one-on-one work with me and my Revive, Restore, Renew You program is where we can get some more functional gut testing done. We can also start to look at more strategically into like supplementation and some strategies there as well too. So lots of different opportunities. If you're curious, click the link in my bio and you can always apply to work with me there. And we will be in touch with you guys and keep building on these more high-level conversations in our Monday Learn with Lo. So have a great rest of your week and we will catch you guys next week.